Hey folks, Dave from Nerdarchy, for nerds, by nerds, and today I got Megan with me. And Megan is a professional GM, but in a way that I'm a little unfamiliar with. You actually run almost like classroom setting D&D games for kids.
Yeah, they are kind of set up in a way to focus on slightly more educational aspects of D&D, but mainly just critical thinking, problem solving, the stuff that's naturally built into the game. So kids can kind of concentrate on that, and parents can understand their kids learn something when they play this game. It isn't just like there is a learning element to D&Ds.
So you run basically like six week campaigns or 6 week arcs, or we can even call them 6 week classes because in the description, guys, you can find links to get a hold of Megan as well as to find where she's running these classes at. How did you get started with this?
Um, well, we had kind of a family situation where the dynamics in our family were shifting. My husband was going back to school, and I was looking to do something to kind of earn a little bit of extra income. I knew about OutSchool, which is the program I used to do this on because my kids had done it. Um, and I applied to be a teacher there. And when I was talking to the and interviewing, I just mentioned, oh, we do Dungeons and Dragons. So I thought about doing a class for that. And they were all on board, very supportive of it. So I started doing just a kind of an intro 2 week session. This is how you build a character. These are the mechanics of the game. And then there some students were like, well, can we do an actual campaign? So then I put together the 6 week kind of starter campaign. And that's kind of how it started. It's about six, sometimes I do more students on call and request, but it's 6 students at a time for 6 weeks, about an hour and a half, which kids, that's about as much as they can really focus in at a time without getting really antsy. So, and then there's different segments. So the first 6 weeks, and if they want to continue, then I do a second 6 weeks, and then so on.
So how many of these courses are you running at a time?
At any given time, I probably have about 10 to 15 at a given time. I do a lot over the course of the week. It's a lot of times I get requests from parents. So I think I'm set up for my schedule, and then I get a parent going, can I get a class set up? So it tends to just expand upon itself a little bit.
Well, it sounds like you're busy.
I am busy. Yeah, it's kind of chaotic because it's an hour and a half class time, but it's a lot more prep time because most of the kids haven't played before. So I offer to meet with each of them ahead of time to help create characters and all of that. So before any section even starts, you're probably looking at about, several like hours worth of meetings just on top of it to get the kids going.
And how what are the age ranges for the children you're working
I
with?
have the youngest age I've done is 8, with the parent saying the kid had played before, and they handled it pretty well. The oldest I've done is about 16. Now I just started a new class for older teens because I find that they just don't always want to mingle up with the younger kids. It's just a development. They're just more mature. But
Mature.
basically, yeah, mature for teens. But my average age range is usually 9 to 12. A lot of 11-year-olds, a lot of 10-year-olds. And typically it's they've heard about this from a friend. Like they've heard about D&D from a friend. Like, ooh, my brother's cousin plays a game and he was telling me about it and he showed me the books. And now I want to do it. So they've been bugging their parents for a while. And the parents are just glad to have somebody that can do it because they don't fully understand it, but they're usually really supportive.
And so you're getting students from all over the country, world,
Uh-huh.
maybe?
All over the country. I've had a few students from England. I have one student from Korea, or stationed in Korea right now. So I do get a global mix of it a little bit.
Oh, that's pretty cool. So, oh, and when did you start with this?
This is actually fairly recent. I started this spring. March is when all of this started. Like I said, my husband was going back to school. We've had some job changes, and it just kind of took off way faster than I thought. I didn't think it would, you know, I thought D&D might be a tough sell because My kids play their own games and they have friends that are into it, but it's not big groups. But one thing I've discovered is this is really popular with kids about 10 to 11. They're into D&D right now. Like a lot of them get the books and have been reading the books a long time before classes even started. Like they had everything set up ready to go, which is waiting for an opportunity.
So are you kind of collecting data as you go as well? Like as far as like, you know, these kids are actually looking to play D&D and you're giving them an outlet to do it. Like like are you figuring do you know where like they're hearing about D&D and
I talked to them about it. I'm sorry to interrupt.
no, that's okay.
Yeah, I talked to them about it. A lot of it is the availability of the books. So somebody might mention it to them, and so they're interested. Well, you can go on Amazon and order the books really easy. You can find them on eBay. A friend has them. They're in the bookstores. And so they're interested in it and they're getting their parents to go get the books. And that's kind of where it starts. Like at least half my kids I hear, they'll go, oh, I've been reading the books for a while, or I have this book, or I have that book, or and then they can go and they Google more things. Like I had one student who wanted to play a turtle because he had been wikiing up every single thing he could find. So now he's a turtle. And but yeah, the kids, because they have such access now to things and they can Google and they can get online, like they can just tap into things and they're much better at it than adults in a lot of ways because it's just been from the get-go for them.
So you know you've really been doing this a short time and to be up to 10, 15
Mm-hmm.
different groups already. That's pretty impressive.
Kids and parents tend to be a pretty loyal group. And if you can connect with the kids, especially in that beginner class I did, is where it kind of started. If you can connect to them and talk to them in a way that shows you respect them and kind of engage them, parents are very likely to come back to you. It's if the kids connect with you, the parents are on board. And that's kind of the goal is to treat the kids with respect and that they're really into this and to encourage it.
That you know that is actually one of the things that we've talked about in the past whenever we're talking about gaming with kids is you can't talk down to them and dumb things down. You have to treat them like people because they are. And even if they don't get something or understand something, they're capable of it. It's just a matter of it being explained.
It's a lot like playing with adults in the same sense. Like you get the players that have read the rules up and down. And even though I say, hey, some elements is our homebrew, I'm doing a little bit different things here. I'm doing milestone leveling. They'll be like, well, the rules say this, and they'll check each other. Like I have kids that literally play with their books open, and I have to tell them, explain, that that's kind of taken away a little bit at some of the time. And then you get to players that are like adults that are like they want to max out their characters, and you know, they're doing everything they can. You get the dice rollers that you can kind of tell are fudging a little bit here and there. It's a lot like playing with adults. Just so you have to kind of understand that treat them in the same sense in that regard.
Well, I imagine with kids you're going to get a little more die fudging than normal. Only because they're more likely to have a win lose mentality. Uh,
Well, and
Go ahead.
okay, go ahead. Well, the way the game is set up is on Zoom, so a lot of them they have their dice at home, so I can't see the dice rolling. And so that's kind of part of it is like I can't call them out on it too much. There was one student that was just rolling 20s every single time, and I just kind of said, finally, man, you have lucky dice tonight. Like you're just getting nat 20s all the time. And he goes, well, this one really was one. So like
He admitted it.
he was just like, okay, I'm good.
Kids, yeah, that's great. Did he, did it dawn on him afterwards? He's like, oh, I just out it myself.
I don't know he got it, but yeah, it was kind of funny.
Uh, yeah, so that's kind of cool. And you were telling me, so you use Zoom, and then you use Roll20, but only on your end, and you kind of manipulate everything and show the maps and do the tokens. So do you show your rolls?
They do see my rolls, and that's actually a kind of a good thing because they can get really upset over the rolling and when it doesn't go their way when I'm doing it. When they can see the rolls and everything, then they kind of like realize, okay, she's not targeting me or she's not fudging. Like it's just, this is just how it's going. When they find treasure too, I do all the rolling for that because that's when the dice rolling fudging really starts to take hold. So if there's a dispute over an item and a couple players want it, I will roll the dice on my end. So, you know, because that's the thing where kids are different than adults. They take it really personally, that type of thing. So I've had kids near tears because their character, for whatever reason, didn't get a magic item in that session, and maybe two other people did. And, you know, I'm kind of just having to kind of talk them through and say, hey, there's more coming. You kind of have to be patient with them and understand that while in a lot of ways it is like adults, they still aren't adults in maturity. And, you know, it's not them necessarily being spoiled players so much as just not, it's difficult sometimes to understand everything and be patient. It's not a skill that they've all fully developed yet.
Yeah,
And
I mean, you know,
players.
many people want instant gratification, you know,
Mm-hmm.
especially kids, you know, and you know that is one of the things you have to understand, especially if you're playing with younger kids that are below the tween age and at the tween age, you know, and as you get to teens, it gets a little, you know, they even out a little bit, gets a little bit, you know, better, it gets better, and you know, and every kid's different, every person's different, so. Charles had made the comment. There are adults that also warping their dice rolls. Yes, yes, we know. At least with the
Yeah.
kids, that you know, at least you can kind of like shrug your shoulders and overlook it a little bit because you know it's something they can grow out of.
Yeah, and like I've seen like adult players and you're like you can see the kid like there's a lot of parallels between them. Um, I will say the one big difference I noticed between the kids and adults, the role playing aspect of it is a lot bigger with the kids. They come up with stuff that I'm not sure adults would fully do, and they can go in directions that you just wouldn't. Like they can be brutal. Like the way my campaigns are designed is 6 weeks, and they have a final battle, and it's against the Priestess of Loth. And I do homebrew and edit things so like it's manageable for kids. But in two games that ended this past Saturday, there were drow characters, and trust me, I talked to them about the women's of drow. They didn't care that turned traitor on their group in the middle of battle, and and the kids liked it. It was, and if that had happened in an adult game, like I think you would have had a lot of angry players, really mad, like you messed up the final battle and we were supposed to do this. But the kids absolutely loved it. They were going to town on it. They were like, that was a highlight for them. So the role playing aspect is a lot more. And sometimes you got to let them just be a little crazy with it. Rein it in when you need to, but understand that's the big draw in it. And I've had parents message me about that too, saying their kids really enjoy the role playing sometimes more than the battles and the fighting.
You know, and I think the younger kids are you know the easier that part comes to them. You know, the role playing, yeah, because kids are still playing make believe up to a certain point, you know, and if you can just get them to carry that over to D&D or any RPG, they're golden. They're kind of already there. I was a little disappointed when I started with my daughter because she was still kind of like playing with dolls, right? So I was like, well, minis are just really small dolls, but you know there just wasn't the carryover where she would role play with dolls, but not in a D&D game.
My daughter started when she was 8. Well, yeah, just about 8. My husband ran a game for her and her friends. And she was kind of the same way to begin with when we first introduced her. She is the most addicted player I've ever seen. And her role playing is kind of scary. Like she takes it very, very seriously. So her character is afraid of spiders. And I've actually seen this in my game too, things similar to this. A druid says they're going to change into a spider for an attack. She sees it happen because she's scared of spiders, runs off screaming into the forest, alerting every single opponent that they're there. And then, like when my husband mentioned it to her, she's like, "Well, that was in character. I'm role playing. That's what I'm supposed to be doing. Like that was my flaw. So I'm just being who I'm supposed to be." And I've had things similar where I had one character whose flaw was he just couldn't resist stealing things. So he stole a sword off the fighter and then used it in battle. When I pointed out the fighter could see all of this, his only response was, "My bad, it's my flaw." So it's like you have to kind of work with that a little bit, but they got along and they handled it better. And I think that's the one thing I have noticed with kids. They handle in-game conflicts a little bit better than adults actually. Whereas the adults players tend to get a little, because I've seen it, where you snap at each other, rulings don't go your way, and your character, another character does something you're mad at, and it can get a little snippety. With the kids, that really doesn't happen so much. They don't get upset with each other. They kind of come in with the understanding this is a game, and they have that mentality, and
Kids
whack that with adults.
kids are less likely to hold a grudge and they get over
Mm-hmm.
stuff a little bit quicker. I feel like they kind of have like a short memory span for that kind of stuff specifically.
Yeah.
So it's one of the things that makes kids so resilient. So Brian has a question. I'm interested in hearing how kids deal with unfair elements of dice rolling. Kids are acutely aware of what's fair and not fair. How do they handle the randomness of dice deciding?
Um, so a lot of it has to do in how I address it. So I try to add some humor to it. So when I see a player starting to get I'm like mad because like I had a magic user who every time he was trying to do firebolt, it just wasn't working. And he was visibly getting upset. So I almost made it comical. Like the fire's going backwards and you accidentally set the bush on fire. And if you can get them to start to laugh about it a little bit, they don't get so upset. And then when they do hit, because eventually they hit, because eventually the dice just roll in their favor, you make it epic. Like then it becomes, oh, you were rage casting, you're just so tired of this, and the bolt just comes out and it just explodes. So if you can kind of minimize the bad aspect of it through humor, and then exaggerate almost the success to a point verbally, then they kind of are okay with it. It's just kind of like when your kid skins a knee. The pain, they don't like it, they're crying. But if you can get them to focus on something else, if you can kind of make them laugh a little bit, tell them jokes, distract them, they'll let you put the band-aid on the antiseptic, it gets a little bit better. It's just that approach is you kind of have to distract them from the bad element, and that's just part of just being where the storytelling of the DM comes into play a little bit more.
That makes me kind of think of the little kid that falls and skins their knee, looks around to see if anyone's watching, and
Mm-hmm.
then decides whether or not to cry.
Yeah, like, and yeah, we have a thing in our house when one of our kids would fall down, we'd immediately go safe, and if they were still upset, obviously they're hurt, but a lot of times they would immediately just stop. The safe was funny, they kind of got distracted, and the momentary pain just kind of shifted, and that's kind of the same thing. If you can just kind of be a little bit humorous about things, and humor is a big deal. If you can get them laughing, they tend to be okay with a lot of things.
So, Dr. Bowers, you may have come in a little bit late. We kind of talked about. We can go over it real quick again. No, long time listener, first time caller here. How did you transition from recreation to professional DMing?
Um, my husband went back to school, and we needed to kind of have another source of income. So I knew about this site that let people host classes. I applied with them, went through the interview process, and put forth this class, and they accepted it. I started with a beginner class, then did a 6-week class. The only thing about it is that they kind of, and this is kind of hard to do, they wanted so it's a 6-week session to begin with. They wanted a description of every week. Well, we know when we play the game that that's really hard to do because one week's going to alter the next week and so on. So I had to use really vague descriptions of what I had planned, knowing that two groups are probably going to be doing completely different things by week 5 because of what happened in week, 2. So that was the only issue. But I focus on a lot of critical thinking, problem solving. So they consider it a class because that is a skill set. And so the kids are getting some educational value in that sense. And the kids just have a lot of fun. Their critical thinking skills can be amusing, though.
Do you have any really good stories you want to share?
Well, at one point in my campaign, the kids have to make a decision to seek an ally, and they are told to search out the tabaxi or search out the werewolves. The werewolves will ask for one of them to become a member of their tribe. The tabaxi just want gold. 9 times out of 10 it's the werewolves. Every single, and they love this. But one group decided to turn the tables, and so they got a werewolf aide to come with them, and then they killed the werewolf with the notion that when everything was said and done, they were going to go back to the tribe and say, we now rule you because we killed one of your members. And I'm like, you can try that. We'll see how that works out for you.
That's an interesting leap of logic.
It is. It's a very, also animal handling. You think you've come up with this great battle for them. Like, they want to try to tame everything first. They want everything to become their pet. So a lot of spiders involved are in my campaign, like giant spiders. I did some phase spiders, and they're like, animal handling. I want to try to animal handle it. And it's like, you want one, but yeah, they want everything to be their pet. So by the time I'm done, like they manage to, like, they get a pseudo dragon at some point. Because that's just but yeah, they really want those pets. That's like a big deal. And it was funny because I had a rogue and a ranger that were in combat with a phase spider. And the rogue came back and had the ranger's back, was keeping him alive, basically, trying to fight the spider off of him that was viciously attacking him. And the ranger was actually able to get away because the rogue maneuvered it in such a way. And the ranger goes, okay, I have your back. I'm going to take care of things. And he walked over to the other spider and goes, can I do animal handling? And the rogue was just like, so they decided they were enemies from that point on in the campaign.
The rogue and the ranger.
Yeah, but they loved it. Like, they were laughing about it out of game. They were having fun with each other, but they became mortal enemies in that moment.
That's funny. So Jake wants to know, do you think adults care invested more about their characters than younger players?
Honestly, I think that's more of a person-to-person thing. I have seen some of these kids really passionate about their characters, and they'll go on and have them detailed out to the most minute point. And I have some kids, like, I'm a halfling rogue. That's just it. They're very basic. I think it's a personality thing more than an adult, because I also know adults, like my husband gets really invested in his characters, and I've seen other adults who aren't. Like, I think sometimes it's just personality, and we put it on like, oh, they're a kid, that's why they're that way. But I think they might be that same way when they're adults, versus like it's just going to carry over a little bit.
Except for the pet thing, that seems to be universally a kid thing. They want pets. They want to tame things. They want a menagerie.
The 3 things I noticed are really universal for kids: the pets. They really, really love rogues. I get about at least 2 per game. I have one game that has 3 rogues that just finished. And they love dragonborns. They absolutely love dragonborns. Like, that is the go-to race. Occasionally you get other things, and like you do get other things, but like, I notice they don't tend to like gnomes and halflings very much. I haven't had a single halfling. I've had a couple of gnomes, a few tieflings, a lot of elves, and a lot of dragonborns.
Yeah, it does seem like a lot of kids that I've seen at the table, like they use the game almost like as a way of testing boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
Like the things that they know they're not allowed to do in real life, they want to then do them in the game.
A lot of kids want to be chaotic evil, I've noticed. And it's interesting because they don't play it chaotic evil, which I've noticed. So they'll say, oh, I want to be chaotic evil. And I tend to give a lot of leeway, because I think with kids, it's really important to let them have some level of ownership. Okay, if you're going to play it and see how it plays out for you. Understand that your group can take reprisal upon you, that like you do something and they can respond back. And that's an important lesson. But when they say they're chaotic evil, they really don't play it chaotic evil so much as just chaotic. I don't think they always get the difference between good, evil, and neutral every single time. They understand more of the chaotic and lawful distinctions, but I don't think they totally get the evil and good. Because I've seen like somebody say, I'm chaotic evil, and they do really good things, just chaotically.
Yeah, they understand rules and not rules.
Yeah.
And they've had, at this point in their short lives, they've had enough of rules, and they want to do whatever they want.
Pretty
And
much, yeah.
so they go to the extreme.
A lot of chaotic characters. You get like, and that element does show. If you are a real rules order person, DMing kids is going to drive you absolutely insane because they do things that are not standard and they try to test the boundaries. And you're in the middle of battle and they're doing things like, why are you doing that? But you have to understand that that's what kids do, kind of. They're kind of chaotic by nature themselves. Like, I mean, if you spend any time around a kid, 5 seconds they're doing this and then they're doing that and then you're looking over there and then you're talking about this. And so that's kind of what kids are. So if you go into it with a mindset that we're running a game and we're running it like I do for adults, you're going to go a little crazy with it. You have to kind of understand this is what I'm dealing with and not get upset when they do things that kids do. Like, because you want to make it fun for them. If you're snapping at them for basically being kids, it isn't going to be fun for them.
It's not good for business. Have you had any parents want to join your games?
Actually, yeah, I had a parent message me after a class saying that they wanted to do a Roll20 game. They've always wanted to do one, and I had just gotten the Strahd mod, so I decided to go ahead and do a Strahd game. So I've just started this Strahd game, invited this parent to join with a few other friends I have. But I wouldn't have done it if the parent hadn't contacted me going, "Hey, could you DM for me on this?" I'm like, I really would like to do something. So, and then I find the parents listen in. Like, there's a lot of parents that sit in the game. Like, I have one student who I can always hear the dad in the background laughing with them, and as they're doing the rolls together. So, like, you get parent participation. A lot of times, parents have played this game before and they really want to get their kids into it. And it's a matter of, well, I don't want to do what my parent does because my parents are, kind of like the weird rebellion of not wanting to do the thing your parent does. So if they can show them it's fun through somebody else, then they can get them into it a little bit more. And I think that happens a lot.
So, looking over at the Outschool, I can see you have a really good rating. People who give feedback are all giving really positive feedback for the class and what you're doing. So that's really cool. And it's also really cool that you're just, you're spreading the hobby to the next generation, and you managed to monetize it as well, which I'm for people taking things that they like and making money doing them. I've always said too, if it's always far more lucrative to do things for pets and kids because people will spend a lot more money on their kids and their pets than they will on themselves.
Well, and I think a lot of times, especially something like this, is, the mindset has changed. And it used to be like parents are like Dungeons and Dragons, you can't do that. Right now, like parents have no issue with it, but it's more of a matter of a lot of parents, either they're trying to get their kid into it, or in a lot of cases don't understand it themselves. They want their kid to be able to do what they want to do, but they don't know how to run a game or how to facilitate it. So they're very happy to have somebody come in and kind of be that middle person. Because I've had a lot of parents going, "Oh, my kid's been asking to play this forever. Can they join with their friend? Can I post this to their friends?" So they're looking for somebody to kind of help get their kid in that direction, and they just don't know. And I look at it like any other activity. I would pay for my kid to go to dance. I would pay for my child to take a music lesson. You're teaching them how to do something, and kids will play this into adulthood. I know a lot of people playing Dungeons and Dragons started when they were young teens, and they are doing it well into their 30s and 40s.
And later. So
Oh yeah, and later. I don't want to age anybody, but yeah.
we get a lot of people who either they've started playing D&D for the first time because they watched videos on YouTube, or they're coming back to the hobby after being out of it for 10, 20 years. So that's really cool because you're like populating the hobby from both ends, really. So at this point, do you know how many kids have been through the program so far?
I currently have, I think I did. Currently, I have about 60 students. I think. I have to double check on that. Um, I've had close to 20 have actually finished the first campaign. A good portion of those have signed up for the second part. Um, and that's another reason why I do it the way I do. Kids haven't, like, you have to assume with any activity, some kids are gonna lose interest. So it's kind of a 2 point thing. A, parents are more willing to pay for something if it's under a certain amount. So doing it by 6 weeks, because our school has a certain price point they want their teachers to aim for. So then it makes it affordable. And the other thing is in 6 weeks, a kid might decide this really isn't for them. And then they can kind of leave it behind and they're done. And the kids that really want to keep going can just keep going. So, but yeah, I've had about 20 finish full on. And a majority of those have signed up for the second part of it, which I think is interesting because they don't always sign up for the same class. So I have different elements coming into play. So that's a challenge. And then I'll keep going. And I just, like I said, started the teen class too, because I did have some requests that the kids wanted to do it, but they weren't comfortable doing it with the younger kids. So.
Well, that makes sense too. And if they want more mature content or whatever, within their age range as well, I imagine. So the intro, you have the intro course. So I imagine you don't need a session 0 because it's kind of built into the course.
Well, session 0 is kind of hard too in a lot of ways because the intro course is a separate thing. So not every student in this class is the intro course. But the problem with session zeros with this is a lot of kids don't know how to do the character sheet. So to go over everything with them it could take multiple hours to go over and build a character sheet. And it's different kind of with adults because you really the math part of it kind of can sometimes throw them with doing the traits. So, why is my modifier 3? Why am I doing this again? And really, you need that one-on-one time with them. And in the intro course, it's kind of built in that way a little bit. So I meet with any student who doesn't know. And I just put in a story device in the very start of it. It explains, how they've come together. They're all very different and kind of give them a chance to introduce themselves that way. But if they were going to build characters together, it's a lot harder with kids. They need to have experience on that to really make a session 0 work. And just at least probably 60 to 70% of the students I have don't have any experience with character building. And it's really funny when I get parents who are like, oh, I'll get them. I'll look up online how to do it. And then a day before class, I get a message so can you meet with my student? This didn't go according to plan. So it's a little tricky for them. Usually when I do it that way, they have an idea of the character they want. And it's just a matter of getting them to understand the numbers and the mechanics of it all. You find out the magic users get really scared. Whenever they see what their starting HP is, kids freak out over that. That one scares them. I want to be a wizard. And they find out they start off with, 8 HP and they're like, how am I going to survive? I'm going to die. And I'm trying to explain to them, you stay in the back. Let the fighters do what they're going to do. I'm not going to throw things at you. You shouldn't be able to handle. I'm not giving you a dragon right off the bat. But they get really scared and their starting numbers. They're so happy when they level up. It's this wave of relief over them because they think they've survived something horrible. But yeah.
I imagine some of that stuff because of video games. They have a preconceived notion. You say hit points. They understand what that means. When I started playing D&D, I had no idea. Someone had to explain that to me. And now they're coming in, and some of the terms they know because video games and other types of games have taken it from Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
So I feel like their baseline now is so much higher than it was for us.
And you definitely recognize the kids that have a video game mentality going into it. They tend to be the kids that just want to, that a few kids, aren't as much into the role playing or into the hitting, and they're trying to max out the characters. You can kind of tell those are the video game players a little bit. You can kind of spot them, and it is a little bit of an adjustment for them. They don't quite understand all of it. The idea of hit die also is a little tricky for them to begin with. When you're leveling up, how you add the HP and everything. It's just kind of just the basic mechanics of the game can be a little bit trickier for kids than adults, I think. And that's to be expected. I mean, adults struggle with it at times.
But it's definitely like I said, it's definitely a cool thing to have that, right? So now, if someone wants to, they want to get their kids involved, and there's two reasons why I would say it's actually kind of great to be able to push it off on someone else. One is if you don't actually know, and two is a lot of times kids will respond better to a stranger than they will to their parents. Like, it's a given the kids just assume you're going to keep loving them no matter what. But with a stranger, they're still kind of looking for that approval.
Well, it's kind of like, okay, so my daughter plays, like I said, my daughter and my son play different games. My son's 13, my daughter's 9. My husband runs their games. They'll come home mad at him sometimes. And I don't think they'd be mad at a regular DM, but it was dad that did this to them. It was, you were supposed to have my back. There's kind of this level of, well, if a regular DM had done it, if somebody I didn't know had done it, it would have been okay. But, why would my dad roll this way against me? And I think there's that element when you're a parent. Kids are just kind of think they're naturally going to get protected by parents, and they almost feel kind of betrayed when the game does what it does, but their parent inflicts it upon them. Whereas, like you said, with a stranger, it's just kind of expected. The other thing is, I think you kind of hit it. Kids can be a little bit freer with somebody they don't know. They kind of just let loose. They have I just think they kind of just let it be. And so they're not totally ready to fight a battle with me that they might be willing to fight with their parents. There's not a whole bunch of other stuff. And then also with the parents, I think it's also just a lot of work to maintain games. I know that when you do with kids, you're dealing with kids' schedules and getting kids places. And if you are a parent trying to run a game, because we deal with this every 2 weeks because their games go every 2 weeks, it's sending notes out to everybody, reminding them to be here and dealing with schedules and juggling and changing appropriately. And do we do snacks? And do we do this? And do we do that? And it can be kind of a headache when you're actually getting kids together in person. But when you're just sitting them in front of a computer and you can walk away, the headache kind of dissipates a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's like, it's a nice alternative to plopping your kids down in front of the TV.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least if they're in front of a screen now, it's more engaging. They are going to learn some skills from it as well. They're going to get basic reading, writing, and math. They're going to get problem solving and critical thinking skills, like you said. And then it goes even further, because when you talk about, you got students that are leaving the game to go research how to do the game better. So they're learning even more.
There's a lot of metagaming that I've had. I know kids are probably worse about that than adults. They'll see, and this is the only downside of the way the program's designed with doing Zoom and then doing Roll20, is how Roll20 is, and you can see your tokens and the list. They kind of get an idea what's coming because they can see that when I'm dragging it out. So they see it and I'm like, oh, we got to go look up what that is. We got to go find out what that is. Oh, it does this. And I'm trying to get them not to do that. I'm trying to get them to the metagaming isn't always smiled upon. But once again, they're at home. They're not doing anything necessarily against, so it's an interesting balance of that. But yeah, they get really into, okay, what's this? What's that? And looking stuff up. Or are we going to face, I had one student who would spend his downtime when his character wasn't going, he was looking up opponents and just saying, hey, are we going to fight this at any point? Hey, you think about fighting that? Who could we handle this creature? And it would just be like, you're going to get your party killed.
I can imagine. Yeah, and part of it is lack of understanding, as well as how the game operates, and the fact, the unspoken, these books are for the players and these books are for the GM. Or have you thought about doing that, like a kids course for hey, let's start you guys GMing?
I haven't. There is another teacher on our school that has done that. I've considered it though. I have one student that joined because they kind of wanted to learn a little about DMing, so I've kind of given them a little clues along the way. But as my schedule is, I don't know if I'm going to be doing that or not because I'm kind of at capacity at the moment with this with what I'm doing. But that would be a really good course for somebody to offer because I know there'd be an audience for it. And my husband's done that with his games. There's a friend who's actually in both games. The kid just loves Dungeons and Dragons. Um, and my husband kind of mentors him a little bit, like at the games, because his whole plan is to get him DMing when he can't. He's like, I've got somebody that can do it now. So, but yeah, kids I think like DMing their own games, and I do know kids in our area that do that for their friends. Like they'll go to one game and then they'll DM another. So
Well, it just got me thinking. Like the kids are already in those other books, and be like, "Oh, you like that book? Well, this is how you use that book." You run the game for your friends.
yeah, I definitely think there would be a market for that, and I definitely think, like I said, if somebody wanted to do that, there would be success at that. I personally just I'm at my limit, so I probably am not going to do it right off the bat.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
might do it later on, but I'm thinking of like but I'm thinking of other things like this kind of silly, completely silly, but things like Halloween themed campaigns and things like that come seasonal. I mean, it was called the summer Dungeons and Dragons Fun Summer Adventure. And I just had to take off the summer just recently, so
Yeah,
the
yeah.
title just changed on me. But yeah, so I'm kind of thinking about things like that along the way too. But yeah, kids would love to DM. I think you need to be a little bit older for that. The kids I DM, especially the 12 and under, I don't think they're quite there yet. But for the 13 and up, yeah, there would definitely be a market for that.
I definitely can think back to my younger days. When, we were DMing for each other, but we weren't doing it well. That's for sure. So has there been any like unexpected surprises from doing this? Things that you find rewarding that you didn't think would have been?
I think the feedback from kids has kind of surprised me how much I enjoy that part, realizing like that how eager they are. Um, when you DM adults, a lot of times you leave the table feeling like, okay, it's been a good game, but maybe a little stressed, a little tired. Like, okay, I got through that. Why were they like this to me? You don't get a whole lot of, oh, thank you, great game, all of that. Kids are so nice at the end of the game. Like, they'll pat you on the back, you get kudos.
Hmm.
So it kind of feels rewarding. Like, you don't get that usual drained feeling sometimes after DMing. It's like you kind of everybody leaves happy, really smiling. It's fun. Honestly, it's just kind of been really pleasant to see the eagerness to do this. I didn't think it was going to be there. I thought, okay, I'll run a campaign, maybe a couple. That's kind of where it'll end. You know, I'll earn maybe a little bit, and that'll be a nice little side thing. And it took off, and I'm really surprised and happy with that to see this next generation coming up that's just so eager to play this, and they're just so into it and they're so excited, and they always want to like I got the dice and they want to show you, and like every aspect of it they're really into, and they've been trying to design things on their own, and like so the next generation of Dungeon and Dragon players is going to be really big if this continues. Like if this is kind of a representation of what's really out there, then the game has a big future ahead of it.
You know, I've found that within the D&D community itself, there's definitely mixed opinions on paid DMing and professional DMing, and I don't know if you observed any of that before getting started, if you had any concerns, but the way you're doing it is really smart. Instead of going to the community where you already know that there's a backlash for it, you've gone to a completely different community where people are embracing it, and you don't. So I imagine you don't have to hear from the haters nearly as much.
I wouldn't DM for pay, like I wouldn't do paid DM for adults. I don't like I wouldn't do that. I'm putting forth the effort to work with the kids to teach them. There is an educational aspect I incorporate into things, and if it wasn't for kids, it might not be the same. I might not have the same mentality of it. But once again, I kind of view it along the lines of an extracurricular activity that I am providing a service for. You know, it's no different than learning to play an instrument or music or a sports activity. And if you were doing that with your kids, you would expect to pay money for the adult who's providing the service. It isn't a huge amount given the amount of time and effort I'm putting into it. So then I also don't feel like I'm bleeding parents for this. Or being greedy, but because it is kids, and because I feel a little bit different about it than like doing paid DMing for adults. I feel like that's kind of a different thing in general. I think when you're dealing with kids, it's a whole different category than if I were doing something for adults.
See, I actually don't, and I just feel like if you're providing a service that people are willing to
Yeah.
pay for, to me, it doesn't matter.
Well, no,
You,
and like I agree with that. I guess what I'm trying to say is I view it separate. So like I wouldn't mind somebody doing it. I just wouldn't do it personally because I my skill set is with kids.
mm-hmm.
I feel so that's kind of where I feel comfortable doing that. Um, I don't know if I would have the same repertoire with adults. My life pretty much is very kid centric. I mentioned to you I have 4 kids. This is kind of what I do on a day in and day in basis. So my reluctance to do paid DMing for adults has more to do with where I feel my abilities lie than like saying, oh no, you shouldn't pay for adults to DM. It's just not something I would personally feel comfortable doing because I don't feel like I feel I'm better at managing kids than I am at managing adults at times. That's what I have experience doing.
And there's nothing wrong with that. And if you found the niche, you're filling the niche, and
Yeah.
that's great that you're expanding it. Comrade 2261 as a question. So I've only heard stories about how D&D was looked at like 30 years ago compared to today. Do you know anyone that used to look down on it that play now?
I don't know if anybody personally so much that plays now. I know a lot of like parents I've heard say, I wouldn't have tried this when I was a kid, and they're letting their kids do it. Or I wish I had been able to do this as a kid, and they're letting their kids do it. The thing about 30 some years ago was the only information they had was basically, the books and word of mouth. And if something negative came out about it, if a parent said, oh, this is bad, it's hurting kids, it's this and that, there wasn't a lot a parent could do to research to find something counter to what they were being told. Whereas now, parents are doing all the research. They go online, they Google it, they find out it's fine, they look at some of the podcast. So it's a different mentality. But since I only really deal with the kids, I haven't played with anybody that said they didn't play as a kid and they had a negative view of it and it changed. Anybody that I personally play with as an adult has kind of been a fan from the get go, or always wanted to play and just didn't, and never had like a change of viewpoint. I just think sometimes the parents might have had a change of viewpoint of how it's perceived. Um, and then it's just, I mean, it's kind of a shift to how we view things that are considered nerdy or geeky too. Whereas a lot of parents are realizing like this is a great source of community, a great way for kids to involve with each other, that just because it has this label doesn't mean it isn't a good activity for their kid.
They're watching Big Bang Theory, they're
Yeah.
watching Stranger Things, so they're seeing this stuff referenced in kind of a more organic way. So the mystique of it has kind of been removed, and,
Well, there is a
and
Stranger Things effect. I've noticed that with kids.
it's all become much more mainstream.
Mm-hmm.
So do you have any thoughts where things are going to go for you with this endeavor? You said you're kind of maxed out right now. I know you
Well,
said
no,
you
I'm
think
willing to
about.
do more classes. I just don't want to create anything new right this second. I want to keep doing what I'm doing. If I can do more of them, that's great. I want to just focus on the campaigns themselves. I am happy to do more classes. It's been fun and it's always entertaining. And the great thing about this is instead of doing like a standard class where it's the same thing over and over again, like I said, every adventure kind of takes a different turn based off of the group doing it. And that makes it kind of fun as an adult to kind of do it with them. So it's not so, okay, I'm doing this again and I'm doing that again. And I got to tell the students, like, it's fun and engaging. I would hope to keep doing this for a while. It's been a really good experience and to get more kids into it.
Now, are you or have you thought about documenting what you're doing?
Actually, every class has a recording. I have to go throughout school, I would think, to publish them, but they keep recordings of everything you do. So I do have that on file. So I have thought about that, seeing if they would be willing to let me post some of these things every so often, because I think they'd be good tutorials, if nothing else. So I have thought about that.
Well, I guess with that, that would be a little bit tricky because you'd have to get releases from all the
Yeah.
parents, obviously, and make sure the kids were okay with
Uh-huh.
it. But I was thinking more on the lines of in writing, or you're doing these campaigns for a younger, a younger audience. Have you considered maybe doing something on Drive Through RPG or the DMs Guild, and
I've thought about
reproducing
that.
them?
I've thought about doing that, and I might start something like that this fall, just seeing if I could just work on it. But like I said, this kind of took off faster than I had anticipated. So the past month has been me kind of just keeping up with the growth, and now I'm kind of getting a handle on it and getting kind of the. So now that I'm kind of feel like I'm comfortable where I am, I might go forward with that. It's just I wasn't expecting to be doing as much as I'm doing at this point, which is good. Like it's great. And I'm able to stay home. I have 4 kids, two with special needs. I'm able to stay home, and we're able to balance all of this. My husband's able to do his school. Like it's working out really, really well for us. So if I could keep this up, it would be absolutely amazing for our family. And it's kind of funny to think this all comes from a game that I do to relieve stress. Like that's where D&D came to me. My husband played before me, and he came to me and he was like, "You need to start playing. It's going to be good for your stress level." So that's how I started, and yeah,
Because sometimes you just need to stab something, and it's
it
better
really
to
is.
do it in a game than real life.
It's like a lot of times with my wizard, I go, I'm rage casting because I had a really bad day with it to the teen. So right now I'm doing fireballs and nonstop fireballs. Are you done with the fireballs? No, I'm not done with the fireballs. I have a little bit more to get out.
Angry
So,
fireballs.
but yeah, it's always kind of really fun when you can take something that you enjoy and find a way to make a living at it, that, and just have fun doing it in the process.
Well, that's very cool. I'm glad you came on. You've come on today, and you're sharing your experiences with us, and talking about this. I think what you're doing is great for the hobby. You're providing a valuable service, for parents and kids alike, and you're expanding the awareness and reach for the future generations of gamers, which we always need more. We always need more gamers. It's very important that we extend. So do you find that you're getting a varied demographic of individuals playing in your classes?
Um, Somewhat. I have a lot more boys and girls, but the girls that I get are really into it. Like they tend to be the more intense players. So that's always interesting to me. Um, as far as demographic, otherwise, it's a mix. It's a like there's all sorts of different kids from different backgrounds, as far as I can tell. There's a limit to what you can ask, but yeah, it's been pretty varied, and it's kind of fun to see that. And that's also fun aspect of it is because I have some students that are from, I have a student from England playing with somebody that lives in California. It's kids don't always network like that very often. So it's kind of fun to build those connections where they become good friends. Like I'll step out of the classroom for a second or I'll let them talk, and they're coming up with their ideas and they're asking each other questions. And like, okay, so you're going to sign up for this class next with me because we got to do this together. And these kids didn't even know each other like 3 weeks or like 6 weeks ago, and they're just becoming fast friends. And that part of it I think is kind of cool too, because you're showing kids also that the world's kind of bigger than just their friend network at home. And some kids, you have to understand, probably, because I get messages from parents, my child doesn't really do well in social groups, or they have anxiety or something like that. And I haven't had an issue with it, because in this setting, it kind of frees them up for that. So you have kids that maybe in their personal life or outside of the home struggle with friendships, struggle with connections, just socializing is a problem. But when they're playing this game together, they can really let loose and they have fun with it. So they're kind of building these connections with each other and realizing, hey, there's an outlet here for me. This can serve something more than just playing a game. This can give me that social time that I need and I'm not finding elsewhere.
There, there's definitely an aspect to the fact that they're doing it from their home, so they're in a comfortable, familiar environment, and then the game almost throws up a a facade or a wall that they can hide behind to kind of help with if they have anxieties to help them get through that. So I think it is really good. We've had people on they've been prescribed D&D for mental health. We have people that are using D&D to facilitate in their practices for mental health. So it is really cool to see how far this hobby has come, and now it's being recognized from the medical field as a beneficial thing. Now it's being implemented more and more into actual school environments, whether it's something like OutSchool, like you're doing, or programs that teachers are now running for after school programs, which I would always hear about them, but I've never seen them. And when I was in school, it was probably like the generation after me that was started getting that. I think more so.
I think that with kids also, it's just so kind of at that age, especially when they're like 11, 12, 13, getting to that age, it's so important for them to understand that you may not fit in with the group in your proximity, but there will always be people out there that you will fit in with. And discovering that at a young age, I think it kind of makes things a little bit, it helps a little bit with the knowledge that, yeah, there are people out there that get me. They may not live right next to me. It may not be the people I see at school, but there are people that get me, and I can kind of, there is a way for me to interact with them and to kind of have that validation that I'm not kind of alone in my interest or my personality, that I can fit in with a group in a social situation. It's just not the social situation that people consider always typical, but they do very well. And like I said, I have several parents that have messaged me saying, they have issues with this, they have issues with that, and I haven't seen it from these kids. And I'm not saying they don't have it for sure, because I understand that, especially as a parent, I say the same thing. But I think it's the construct of what you were saying and the way it works that it just kind of eases that and makes it something that can help them and a very accessible kind of relief for them. So there's, because, I have a son with severe autism, and his symptoms always get worse when he's anxious, when he's worried, when he's stressed. And when you can put them in an environment that almost takes that away, then they can just be themselves. And there's like a freeing element to that. That even though they're role playing, they're probably being more themselves in a lot of ways than they were when they weren't role playing, if that makes sense. So what I'm saying.
It makes total sense. And you touched on something that I find very important, is the fact that by doing this and expanding their world, because they're interacting with people all over the country and in some cases other countries, you've expanded their world, and maybe they feel isolated and alone in their community, but you're offering them other communities to plug into, and it does give them that, it helps alleviate some of that aloneness. Talking about having these kids where they're talking about, oh, I'm going to do this next course, you got to do it with me, and they're developing these friendships. And the thing about this hobby, if you stick with it long enough, you're gonna have friends that kind of follow you all the way through. So I think this hobby is really good at developing those friendships that span decades compared to a lot of other things.
Some of my best friends that like I interact with on a regular basis don't live necessarily next to me, but they're in my I have a group I've been in for a while now, and like we share everything with our kids' pictures, all of this stuff. It's like you come together for this game, but it becomes a little bit more than that, and you start like knowing the ins and outs of each other's lives, and you share information. And I think that holds true for kids too. I mean, they crave that sort of connection with friends, and like you said, it's just kind of a way to build that up.
There is very few things I can think of off the top of my head that builds relationships the way the way I've built relationships by playing, by playing this game.
There's something about stabbing something together. It just kind of bonds you.
Yeah, that's it. The orc blood. It's the orc blood that really cements a friendship for good. We are up on the hour marker, maybe a little bit past. I want to thank you for coming on. I really do appreciate it. It's been a great conversation. Anything you want to say before we go?
Just if you have a kid that's interested in playing, just let them go for it. Just any way you can facilitate it. I think it's always fun to watch, whether you're doing it or somebody else. But kids have, and even if it's just putting a book in their hand and saying, "Hey, you want to read the player's handbook? I have this." You'll kind of be amazed by some of the results. Like, kids are truly kind of amazing in how quickly they can take an interest in something, their insight into it, everything. So just take the reins a little bit and see where that goes with them.
So with that, folks, thanks for hanging out. Thanks for being on, Megan. As always, in the description, you can find links to go check Megan out. If you got some kids you want to send her away, absolutely do that. Check out the program. It sounds like a great value. It's only like $10 a week or something, so it's great. It's a great way to get your kids into the hobby. And granted, you may be a parent and you want your kids to game with you, but doing stuff with your parents is never cool. So let Megan be the gateway drug to D&D for you. With that, until next time, stay nerdy.